Welcome to Christ's Table. My name is Kevin Young, and I get the privilege of serving as lead clergy at Christ's Table. If you'd like to know more about us, who we are, what we do, you can visit that URL that is right up there, www.christstable.today. Would encourage you to sign up for the email list there so you get a handle of everything that's going on around Christ's Table. But if you would like to know more about this study in particular, the book, the URL that's right there in front of you, is the place where you need to go. go.christstable.today/the book. What we're doing during this study is we're kind of looking at the Bible and looking at different sections of the Bible to see what we can learn from outside creative perspectives about genres and some of these things, which sounds a little boring, but it's actually been very, very interesting. Now, if you go to that URL right there, you're going to be able to download a study sheet that gives you all of the days of this study, as well as the scriptures in the Bible that are attached to that. But we also have a second download there that is a study guide that lists all of the texts of the readings that we're doing, gives some background information that will be helpful to you in understanding it a little bit more, some questions to help you dive a little bit deeper or begin conversations, and even a separate section of questions for youth and for youth and children, for you to guide conversations with them as well about these passages and about these topics. Now, this week we've been talking about the book of Psalms, and the book of Psalms is a songbook in the Hebrew scriptures that contains songs that cover a very wide range of topics and a very long time period. And as you might imagine, if you walk into a record store or look on Spotify or look at a soundtrack for a movie, you're going to find that there is a very diverse set of emotions and topics when you come to music. And so you find that in the book of Psalms as well. One of the most difficult sections, though, perhaps, of the Psalms is lament. Not because it is difficult to understand what lament, grief, sorrow, sadness is, but more difficult maybe because we have a disconnectedness from lament. But I might say that this idea of lament, sorrow, grief, sadness, mourning is something that is inherent to the Christian faith and is maybe a core value of a Christian faith, understanding death, facing death, being okay with death. And that is not something that society tends to be okay with or have a good relationship with today, especially in the United States of America. And it's certainly not something I think that the church has central to its comfort zone anymore. And so lament is a great place for us to be in the Psalms because it reminds us of the power and the importance of lament, not just in death, but in situations that are sad, that are difficult, that cause remorse. Now, yesterday we talked kind of about an individual lament, one of the darkest songs in the book of Psalms, but today we're going to talk a little bit about a communal lament. In Psalm chapter 90, verses 1 through 8 is where we're going to be. And so kind of the setup for this is that this is labeled as a song of Moses. And there's kind of a lot of history here and even some questions as to why it may have been labeled a song of Moses. But what we see here is kind of a tale of two ideals. And the difficulty is that whenever this song is kind of written and sung and what comes out of this, it comes out of a time of national pain where the entire country has rebelled against God and the covenant that they had with God, so that when rebellion came, then difficulties would come as well rather than blessings. And that has that's happened. And so the entire community is grieving and is crying out in remorse. It's difficult in U.S. America for us to kind of place this idea of communal lament over top of our experience, because I honestly can't think of a time whenever we as a people have been in deep sorrow for something that we have maybe done, in grief or in mourning for something that we have done wrong. We tend to kind of pretend as though we haven't done something wrong in those moments, right? As a community, that we didn't offend, that we didn't harm a people group, that there's nothing to see here, just keep looking. Or we tend to blame shift. It's not our fault. It's somebody else's fault. It's their fault. It's the other political party's fault. It's that other community or that other ethnic group or that other people or situation that caused us, that put us in a situation where we had to do this. So there's not a lot of sense in the US, I think, of self-actualization or ownership of when we make mistakes. We just kind of tend to pretend we didn't and move on. The Gulf War, the foundation for all of that. I probably shouldn't get into all of this, but was there ever an apology? Was there ever a mourning? Racism in America. We have difficulty saying it was wrong by offering reparations, or we shouldn't have to do that. That was other people. Why would we lament over that still? Let's move on. George Floyd. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I know that I'm hitting hot button issues, but we have a difficulty doing that. And maybe the feelings that you're feeling over that, maybe I should have named or could have named other things, are the pushback that maybe we should feel a different feeling in those moments. And so Psalm chapter 90 is one of those communal laments. And if you kind of want to understand the foundation of that, then back up and do some extra credit reading in Psalm 88 and 89, and you're going to kind of see this progression that gets to 90 where this communal lament is. And we're going to read the first few verses of Psalm 90, and you can feel free to read the rest of the lament in the chapter if you want to on your own time, but this will get us started. Lord, through all the generations, you have been our home. Before the mountains were born, this is a song, remember? So this is poetry. Before you gave birth to the earth and the world, from beginning to end, you are God. You turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. So there is an expiration date for everyone, for all of us. You created, you take away. You give, you take back. It's a song. For you, 1,000 years are as a passing day, as brief as a few night hours. You sweep people away like dreams that disappear. They're like grass that springs up in the morning, and in the morning it blooms and flourishes, but by evening it is dry and it's withered. We wither beneath your anger. We are overwhelmed by your fury. You spread out our sins before you, our secret sins, and you see them all. And so now we're kind of turning a corner here, and we'll hit pause, and we're getting into this season and this prayer of tension. Tension between God and people. And that tension certainly begins just in the sense that God has the full authority in the minds of this songwriter to do as he or she or they, whatever you want to call or think of God, whatever God pleases, God is able to do. And that causes some tension. But the real tension in this song seems to come whenever there is, and let's just go back here to this. Whenever there's a reason for anger, whenever we, let's say communally, have done something offensive, whenever we've not loved our neighbor, whenever we have brought harm to other people, individually, yes, but in the picture here, it is communally, that we are all taking ownership and responsibility together. Again, it's kind of hard to wrap our minds around because we don't think of ourselves much anymore as a singular unit, especially in the US whenever there are things in which we do wrong. Pilate, washing the blood off of our hands of responsibility. But God spreads out all the sins before him, and he, God, sees them all. There is no avoiding it. Now, again, this is a lament, a song of sorrow that comes out of a season of brokenness where they are in repentance and sorrow for the discipline that has come to them. And so, kind of the key that this song turns around is, how can a holy God live with a rebellious people? How can he live with them? How can somebody who is as great and who is mighty, who can cause somebody just by the mere word to return back to the dust of the ground, how can an immortal have anything to do or say with the sins and the brokenness and the problems of a mortal people? In the mind of the songwriter, God has given God's best, and yet what is God to do? How is God to live with us whenever we, in return, give the worst? It's important that we think about that on a national scale, on a people scale, on a broad scale. How can a holy God live with a rebellious people? Now, I want to ask that question maybe in a bit of a different way now, because when this is live, there is Christmas lights going up everywhere. It's a week or so before Thanksgiving. People are beginning to decorate their houses and prepare for the 25th of December, the advent of the coming of God in the flesh. And so I think that there is, at least from a Christian perspective, a very clear and literal answer to how can a holy God live with a rebellious people? A holy God literally comes and lives with a rebellious people in the skin of Jesus Christ. And so this is in many ways the answer to the question that is posed here in Psalm chapter 90, or at least it is an answer. For Christians, it's considered to be the answer. So whenever we're thinking about how can a holy God live with a rebellious people, I think that there is something to be said for thinking about this communally and reflecting on lament and the importance of this, and considering how we can ask and what our response should be to a holy God coming to live with a rebellious people. But also I think that it requires us to reflect on Jesus Christ and how Jesus is both the answer to that question and maybe not the full and complete answer to that question. Does Jesus absolve us from all responsibility for remorse and sorrow and lament over our wrongdoings just because Jesus exists? Just because grace exists, just because forgiveness exists, just because redemption exists, does that mean that now we can blame shift everything that we do wrong onto the back of Jesus and say, sorry, refugees, sorry, racism, sorry, George Floyd, we're broken people, God's forgiven us. Que sera, sera. Or is both Jesus the answer to the question, how can a holy God live with a rebellious people? But maybe not the full and complete answer. Maybe there is still responsibility and necessity and the power in the people of God lamenting whenever they've missed the mark. Well, it's been good to be with you today. Looking forward to being back with you again tomorrow for the conclusion of the book of Psalms, whenever we move on to the next section next week. Until that time, happy reading.